So, here's the thing. Star Trek IV has been in the works for what feels like, forever? And ever since Star Trek Beyond hit theatres back in 2016, fans have been waiting to see the Kelvin Timeline crew back together again. Now, don't forget, that's Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, John Cho and Simon Pegg. But instead of boldly going into production, the project kept stalling. Directors signed on, then left, scripts were written, then scrapped. At one point, it even looked like the whole thing had been abandoned. And yet the movie is still hanging on. Paramount hasn't shelved it completely, and the latest working title, New Horizon, suggests this might not just be another sequel, but the crew's last big send-off. That's got fans like us wondering, is this the end of the Kelvin Timeline? Will we actually get to see Kirk, Spock and Uhura take the Enterprise out one more time? Well, let's break down everything we know so far, and maybe figure out if Star Trek IV is finally ready to leave space dock. Paramount's latest position. Alright, let's start with where the studio stands. Paramount keeps saying Star Trek is a priority. Now, if you're a fan, that probably sounds like corporate fluff, right? But in Hollywood, calling something a priority usually means the studio isn't giving up on it. It's still on the radar, still alive, still something they want to make happen. But here's the catch though. Paramount isn't just juggling one Trek project. They've got actually two in the pipeline. The first is the long-delayed Star Trek IV, which is supposed to wrap up the Kelvin Timeline crew's story. The other is an origin story film that's focused on humanity's first contact and the creation of Starfleet. That one has Andor director Toby Haynes attached, with Seth Grahame-Smith writing. So, what's the problem? Well, the big Paramount Skydance merger. Until the dust settles, both movies are basically stuck in limbo. The cast and their uncertainty. Now, the cast is where things get interesting. Chris Pine, our Captain Kirk, has been super honest about not knowing much. In fact, he admitted he hasn't even seen a script. At one point he said, "Not that I know of," when asked if the movie was moving forward. Great. Well, later, when news broke that a new writer was hired, Pine said he was surprised because he thought a script already existed. Now that doesn't exactly scream confidence, does it? On the flip side, Zoe Saldana, Uhura herself, has been a little more upbeat. She joked in an interview that they need to get this movie rolling before everyone's hair turns grey. But she also said she'd love to explore more of Uhura's relationship with Spock, both personally and professionally. Then you've got Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban. Quinto has said the delays are frustrating, but emphasised how close the cast still is. Urban has been open about wanting to return, though scheduling could be tough with his The Boys commitments. Overall, they're ready, they're willing, but they're just like us. They're waiting for Paramount to actually give the green light. So, who's actually steering this ship now? Let's look at the new creative team. Well, the most recent name attached is Steve Yockey. If that name rings a bell, well, he's the co-creator of The Flight Attendant. Paramount brought him in to write what they're calling the final chapter of this version of Trek. That's a pretty big promise though. J.J. Abrams is still around as a producer, and now Simon Kinberg, the guy who shepherded in the X-Men movies, is also reportedly involved. So on paper, that's a pretty solid lineup. But here's the thing. Star Trek IV has gone through more writers than a rotating fan fiction site. Lindsay Beard, Geneva Robertson Drowett, Josh Friedman, Cameron Squires, they've all taken a crack at it. Each version has supposedly been different, from character-focused stories to big cosmic adventures. The revolving door has made it hard for even the cast to keep track of what's actually happening. Still, Yockey coming on board feels like a reset. He's known for writing twisty, character-driven stories, which might be exactly what Trek needs. If this really is the goodbye movie for the Kelvin crew, fans want something personal, emotional, and worthy of the legacy. So, past attempts that fell apart. Now, if you've been following this saga, you know Star Trek IV has had a long list of almosts. Let's start with the biggest, the Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth reunion. The idea was to bring back Hemsworth as George Kirk, Captain Kirk's dad, in some sort of time-bending storyline. Sounds epic, right? But negotiations fell apart over money, and the project died before cameras even rolled. Then came Noah Hawley, the creator of Fargo. He had his own take lined up with a brand new crew, but when Paramount got cold feet, that version was shelved as well. Oh, and we can't forget Quentin Tarantino's wild pitch, an R-rated Star Trek described as pulp fiction in space. That one actually had a draft written by the Revenant's Mark L. Smith, but Tarantino walked away. Fans are still curious about what that could have been though. Can you imagine? Well, most recently, Matt Shakman, fresh off WandaVision, was locked into direct. Paramount even started prepping sets and crews, but delays pushed him away, and Marvel snatched him up for Fantastic Four. Once again, Trek was left floating without a captain. So let's look at plot, speculation, and some themes here. Well, here's the part that fans are really dying to know. What's the story? Officially, Paramount hasn't revealed a single detail. No logline, no villain, nothing. But there are a few threads worth pulling. For years, one rumoured storyline was that father and son angle that we were talking about, with Kirk crossing paths with George Kirk. That idea might still exist somewhere in the archives, but with Hemsworth gone, well, that actually feels unlikely. Another thread comes from Zoe Saldana's comments about Uhura and Spock. Their relationship was teased throughout the trilogy, and she thinks it makes sense to explore where it goes next. That could give the film some emotional weight. And then there's the absence of Anton Yelchin, who tragically passed away in 2016. J.J. Abrams made it clear Chekhov won't be recast, so the film will likely include some sort of tribute to him. Fans are expecting a heartfelt moment that honours both the character and the actor. But outside of that, total mystery. Over the years, Trek has flirted with everything from smaller character-driven adventures to huge MCU-level blockbusters. Pine himself has argued for a smaller film, less about box office, more about the fans. But whether Paramount listens is the big question there. So, what missed opportunities were there and what could have been? This movie has had more near misses than the Enterprise dodging Klingon torpedoes. One of the wildest what-ifs came in 2018, when Danai Gurira, Okai from Black Panther, was in talks to join the cast. No one knows exactly who she would have played, but she said the character was very different from her usual roles. That film would have also reunited Chris Pine with Chris Hemsworth as father and son Kirk. Imagine that dynamic. Two captains from different eras colliding in one story. Unfortunately, well, the whole project fell apart over contract disputes and creative disagreements. And that's just one version. Quentin Tarantino had his Pulp Fiction in space pitch. Noah Hawley was ready to launch a brand new crew, Matt Shakman had sets and crew lined up before leaving for Fantastic Four, and each of these could have been the movie that kept Trek alive on the big screen, but none of them made it past the starting line. Fans, we love to speculate about what might have been, don't we? But the truth is, every failed attempt added more baggage to Star Trek 4. At this point, the next film has to cut through years of almosts and deliver something that's been worth the wait. So where do things stand now? Well, where are we actually at with Star Trek 4 right now? The short answer, limbo. Paramount officially pulled the movie from its release calendar, which basically means don't expect it anytime soon. That said, the studio hasn't cancelled it either. They're still calling it a priority, still keeping writers attached and still talking about it like it's going to happen. The big wrinkle is the merger with Skydance Media. Until that's finalised, big projects like this are on pause. Execs want to re-evaluate the entire Trek brand, figure out how the movies, shows and streaming projects all connect. That means Star Trek 4 is waiting in the wings until the dust settles. The latest word, though, is that Steve Yockey's script is meant to be the final chapter of the Kelvin Timeline movies. That's both exciting and bittersweet. If it happens, this could be the send-off Pine and the crew deserve. If it doesn't, well, fans may be looking at a different Trek movie altogether, like that origin story project we spoke about. Right now, it's Schrodinger's Trek, both alive and dead until Paramount actually makes a move. At the end of the day, Star Trek IV New Horizon is the definition of a Hollywood mystery box. We've had directors come and go. Scripts rise and fall, and cast members go from hopeful to confused. Whether it actually happens is anyone's guess, but if Trek has taught us anything, it's that no matter how dark the void seems, there's always one more star on the horizon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Live long and prosper. Cheers, bye.